Okay, let's look at that lyric. I can see it in the stars across the sky. Dreamt 100,000 dreams before. Now I finally realize, you see, I've waited all my life for this moment to arrive. And finally, I believe. I've waited all my life for this moment to arrive, and finally, I believe. So I have a question for us this morning. I have a question for myself this morning, which is, what's the difference between the time in my life when I don't believe and the time in my life when I do believe? What's the difference between the questioning uncertainty of living life and that part of life where I believe? What has happened in my life? What needs to happen in my life, or what has happened in my life, that takes me from, or took me from, or will take me from, I don't know, to I believe? What is it? What is that thing? How do you get from I don't know to I believe? Or the opposite. How do you get from I believe to I don't know? There's a moment in the Red Room which, if you haven't seen yet, I would tell you, try to see it. Brad Blaisdell is giving the performance of a lifetime. And it's just a privilege to watch him get up on that stage and live that life. And there's a moment at the end of the play where the character of Edwin says, I would give everything if I could just go back to the hope I had when I was young. And it's interesting. I don't think I've ever had a talk where I've had to write things down in pencil on the page I was looking at, because things just keep flying through my head with this topic this morning. I would give everything to have the hope that I had. So what's different? What's different? What happens in our lives that takes us from the hope we had to a place where maybe we're not so hopeful? Hope, of course, not being the best strategy of life. Or from a place of absolute certainty to, I just don't know anymore. What is it? What is it that does all of that? What is the difference? The title of my talk today is, What's the Difference? All of a sudden. So I want to ask you right now, where are you? Are you in that part of life where you're questioning and wondering and uncertain? Or are you in that place where you are absolutely, unquestionably certain that you believe? I love that moment. Finally, I believe. So I'm going to ask you this morning, where are you? Where are you? As I said, the title of my talk is, What's the Difference? What has to happen for us to get from uncertainty to belief? Or what has happened to get us from belief to uncertainty? And you know what the answer to that question is? Do you know what the answer to that question is? What'd you say? Faith. No. So, what has had to happen to get us from here to here, or from here to here, or to be living in that nebulous place in the middle, are conditions. Those things in our life that show up, that either question what we believe, or actually start dictating to us what we should believe. You know, the character of Edwin, when he gets to the end of the play, he has lived a very, very full, desperate life. And all of those conditions bring him to a moment where he says, oh my God, how did I get here? So that's the question this morning. Are you living, and this is all part of CPR. This CPR, this Core Prosperity Relief, has been uncharted for me. It has just been unbelievable. It has just taken me to the heights of questions and answers and understanding. And one of the things I understand from this program, and from everyone that's been in it, over 320 people that have written in this program and told me where they are, I really get it. Most people live a life based on the conditions that are present in their life. That's where their belief comes from. That's what they believe. So whatever's going on around you dictates, to most people, how you approach life, what you think about life. Conditions, 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 conditions. And we are not our conditions. We are that which experiences the condition. And if you are experiencing any condition in a way that you don't like, that is your responsibility to change your experience, change your reaction to it. And just so you know, this is good news. It really is. This is good news. It puts you in the driver's seat. It says you can change your mind about whatever's going on. You don't have to wait for things to change for you to change. And way too many people are waiting for things to change so that they can then change. Mark Nepo, in The Exquisite Risk, which is just a remarkable book, he writes, "My purpose at last is to hold nothing back. My goal is to live 1,000 years, not in succession, but in every breath." Ever feel like you've lived for 1,000 years? And it's just continuing to evolve? I love this idea, to live 1,000 years in a single breath. So what's the difference between holding nothing back? What's the difference between being a consciousness that holds nothing back and someone who withholds from life? And I would ask you to ask yourself, do you go through life holding nothing back? Do you go through life just unabashedly looking at the world and saying, "Here I am," and just doing whatever comes to you to do? Or do you withhold? Do you hold back and go, "Well, I will do that when. I will feel that way when. I will succeed at that when." We got to get rid of the when. That sounded funny to me. We got to get rid of the when. So, are you someone who holds nothing back, or are you someone who is withholding from life? And what's the difference? What's the difference between those two mindsets? And you know what the answer is? The last line of the song. Finally, I believe. The only thing that changes our consciousness, the only thing that takes us from a withholding consciousness or a withholding lifestyle to a life of unabashed, holding nothing back, just living life to the fullest, is a belief. There is a belief within that says, I got to hold back. Just like there's a belief within that says, put me in it. Let me go. Let me do whatever it is I want to do. So again, what has to happen to bring me to I believe? I think that the question screws us up. What has to happen? Just the idea of what has to happen actually, in my mind, puts me in a place of saying something out there has to happen. Something has to happen for me to believe. Something has to happen for me to show up. Something has to happen for my life to change. So it's not really what has to happen. It's what belief do I have to really invest myself in. You know, this week in CPR, and I shared this on Wednesday, I had a huge aha moment. And it was when I understood this affirmation for myself, which was, the facts haven't changed, but I have. The conditions in my life haven't changed, but I have. I have changed my consciousness about the facts. I have changed my awareness about what's going on. And that doesn't mean anything has to change out here. Because as soon as we keep our focus out here, we're lost. We are going to be like a feather in the breeze. It's always going to be flopping up and down and here and there, because my focus cannot be out here on conditions. So, the things in my life haven't changed, I have changed. Today on CPR, we talked about being the actor in the story of your life. And Ernest Holmes writes this. He says, "Infinite mind is the actor, and you are the announcer." You are the announcer. So the question I have is, what are you announcing to the world about your life? What is it you announce to the world? Today, someone announced on CPR, "I refuse to get stuck." I refuse to get stuck. Because one of the questions was, where are you stuck in your life? And his thing was, I refuse to get stuck. So does an announcement like that to the world, does that become a game changer in your life? When you stand firm and you say, I refuse to get stuck, I refuse to buy into what I'm seeing, is that a game changer, yes or no? How many people think yes? Raise your hand. How many people think no? Raise your hand. How many people think it's conditional? Raise your hand. How many people are awake? Raise your hand. It is about being awake. Okay, so is it a game changer? No, and Reverend Doug just said it. The only time anything is a game changer is if it's backed by a belief. So when I say I refuse to get stuck, and absolutely mean it with every fiber of my being, guess what? I am unstuck. It really depends on how much belief is behind it. And I want to share with you one of the stories that came on CPR. And Ryan, are you here? Well, one of our members who's taking CPR, Ryan, he wrote about this incident that happened to him when he was a little kid. And as I was reading his blog, I swear to God, I was sweating. Because I have this thing about being held tight in. I have this little claustrophobic thing. Actually, not anymore. I used to have that. Not anymore. So I'm reading this article, I'm reading his little blog, and it says, when I was 7 years old, my brother stuck me in a sleeping bag and zipped it tight and walked away. I know! And I was like, oh my God, who is your brother? And then I thought, my brother did worse things. So they zipped him into this sleeping bag and they walked away. And he said that he just went ballistic. And he's screaming and he's yelling, and the sleeping bag, made to be sturdy, wouldn't budge. And he said he must have flipped out for like an hour or however long it took him to just scream until he finally got so exhausted from flipping out that he just kind of stopped and looked up and realized that he could just pull the zipper. Now, it wasn't an inside zipper, but he could actually finagle it so that it opened and he let himself out. And I read that blog and I thought to myself, oh my God, what's the difference between the person stuck inside the sleeping bag, screaming to get out, and the boy who walked away from the sleeping bag? Consciousness. What's the difference? The difference is there is a part of you, there is a place in you that if you stop reacting to the conditions of your life, you may actually tap into that within you that has an answer to every single thing that goes on in your life. And you will come from a place of clarity and not a place of uncertainty. So, what would be a game changer in your life, do you think? Think for a second to yourself. What would be a game changer in my life? What could I experience that would change my life in a really big way? There was a survey done, and number one answers to what would be a game changer in a life. And it was like, what would you do that would truly affect your life in a positive manner? And there were 3 number one answers. So, what would be the game changer in my life? What do you think the number one answer was? Oh my God, that's it. Winning the lottery. Number one game changer, winning the lottery. What do you think the second, now this was asked to a bunch of actors. What do you think the second number one answer was? Getting a TV series. Absolutely. And what do you think the third number one answer would be? What? Winning an Oscar. I know some people that didn't think that was a game changer. That's not it. To fall in love with your soulmate. 3 number one answers to what would be a game changer in my life. Now here's the problem. What's the difference between those things as game changers and those things as hope, as a strategy, which we talked about last week? Absolutely nothing. Any game changer for you that is something outside of yourself happening to you is not a game changer at all. Which is why so many people win the lottery and a few years later they're broke. It was a good couple years, but they're broke. And they're struggling again because it wasn't really a game changer. It was just something that kind of floated along. So when you think about what is the greatest thing I could do to have a game changer in my life, and when I think about the idea the facts haven't changed but I have, and why, in the midst of all of these facts changing, and there's another person in our congregation who wrote this wonderful blog yesterday about how all of a sudden she got it. All of a sudden she woke up one morning and she said, oh my God, so if I just change my mind about all of this, it'll feel different? And so she did, and it did. And she wrote this blog saying, I can't believe that all of a sudden I feel confident and successful and good and powerful, and yet nothing has changed in my life. What is that about? Well, if it's about anything, and what I hope you really get this morning is that we live in a world of consciousness. And the effects and the facts and the conditions of your life should have no bearing on your consciousness, only to the degree that you allow it to have bearing on your consciousness. So, what's the difference? There's one and only one game changer. And I say it all the time. And we hear it all the time. And I have had a million ways of bringing this forth. But the only game changer that will ever make any sense, the only game changer that will make any difference in your life is the one game changer, which is, I know who I am. I know who I am. And if I'm willing to say I know who I am, I have to be willing to say I know who I am in this situation even. I know who I am even with all of this happening. I know who I am. That's the only game changer. I can't spend my life waiting for this to change in order to think that's going to change who I am. And way too often, we let all of this stuff change who we are. And that's the thing that Ernest Holmes talks about be the actor in your life. And what he says is, very often, unfortunately, we choose roles to identify with and then live those roles, forgetting that we're the actor. Fire that actor. I would do that. I have done that. I have looked at actors and said, it's not going to work out this time. You are not playing the role the way it was written. And if you're not willing to play the role the way it was written, then bye-bye. I say it nicer than that sometimes. But that's what God is saying to you. I have given you a brilliant script. I have given you everything you could ever possibly need to give the performance of a lifetime. Why are you overacting? Okay. Just make sense out of it, for God's sake. Get it? For God's sake. Just make sense out of what I gave you. I gave you, you are God. I gave you, you are prosperity. I gave you, you are passion. I gave you, you are life. I gave you, you are anything you want to be. Why have you chosen to be an extra? Seriously. What's the difference between Meryl Streep and Merle Shasherberry out in Iowa, who left LA because it didn't work? What's the difference? Consciousness. That's it. And I get it. Yes, Merle is very talented. There are also some really untalented stars. And I don't say that's too bad. They shouldn't have their stardom. Anyone who creates whatever they created it from a place of power. And therefore they are allowed to be the Jersey Girls of whatever and have their careers. Was that judgmental? A little. Okay. So... So God has given you an incredible script to live. God has given you the opportunity to star in this thing called life. And all you need, the only thing you need to live this life, the difference, what's the difference? What's the difference between the life you may be leading now and the life you can live? And notice I didn't say could live. The life you can live, what's the difference? Thank you. Consciousness. One thing. Belief. Belief. There's only one game changer, and that is, I know who I am. My life is unfolding perfectly only works for me as an affirmation if it is backed into I know who I am. Because I can say my life is unfolding perfectly until the cows come home, and if I don't know why that's true, I can't hold on to it. It's like, that was true last week. It's not true this week. So I'm asking you, are you ready? Are you willing to really, really have a game changer in your life? Are you ready to really understand what the difference is between belief and uncertainty? And are you willing to do whatever is necessary to get yourself to that place? Yeah, the song, there's a line in the song. I can see it in the stars across the sky. Dreamt 100,000 dreams before. Oh my God, haven't you? Haven't I? Dreamt 100,000 dreams. All those Oscars I was going to win. All those Tonys I was going to win. All those Tonys I was going to date. Not that I ever need to. 100,000 dreams. Now I finally realize, you see, I've waited all my life for this moment to arrive. And finally, I think it's time for us to stop waiting. I don't want to wait all my life. I want to know it now. Mark Nepo wrote, "What we reach for individually may be different, but what makes us reach is the same." There is something within each of us that truly knows the difference, and it is not our conditions. What's the difference is that a mind that knows itself, a mind that knows who it is, doesn't have to worry about what's going on around them. 100 million stars shooting across the sky. It's easy to stand there and know the truth. It's easy to go to Joshua Tree and stand in the desert and see all those stars and know the truth. It's easy to close your eyes and cross your legs and sit in a meditation and know the truth. What I love about this science is that it teaches me how to stand right in the middle of maybe the most undesired conditions that may be going on and still see the 100 million stars and still know who I am. I say we all take the job as the star of our own life. And I say we start saying to ourselves, I have a magnificent script. I have the best role to play. And it is God. And it is saying to me, anything you want, anything you desire, whatever life you choose to live, you can live. And it doesn't matter what anything looks like. It matters what it looks like in here. What's the difference? The difference is I know who I am. And nothing can take me off of that truth. And nothing should ever take you off of that truth. You are God. Namaste. Thank you.